So welcome everybody. We're just going to give us a few more minutes to let folks sign in, and then we'll get started. So welcome to those just coming in. We're going to give folks just another minute or two to get signed in, and then we'll get started with our webinar. All right, well, welcome everybody. Our attendees are growing in numbers. We'll give folks just one more minute, and then we'll get started. Thank you for joining us, though. Well, it looks like we're leveling off in numbers, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to today's webinar on the Oregon Department of Energy's Biennial Energy Report. Thanks so much for joining us to learn more about what's in this year's report. My name is Andy Cameron. I'm the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Manager here at the Oregon Department of Energy, or ODO as we call ourselves. I'll be your MC today, but I'll be joined by a number of authors on this report. I do want to start today by acknowledging that Indigenous tribes and bands have been with the lands that we inhabit today in the Willamette Valley and throughout Oregon in the Northwest for time immemorial. As the late Coquille chief Don Ivy once said, Oregon has been home to tribal people before there was an Oregon. ODO's offices are in Salem, in the land of the Kalapuya, who today are represented by the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde and the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians, and whose relationship with this land continues to this day. So here's our agenda for the day. The purpose of our webinar is to introduce you all to the report's content through a brief orientation of each section. We'll start with a bit of background on the report and the process we use to scope and draft it. We'll then provide an overview for each of the report sections. There's energy by the numbers, the history timeline, resource and technology reviews, Energy 101, and policy briefs. We'll end by touching on a few of the topics that are covered in multiple sections, and then talk about some of the next steps and end with hopefully some time for your questions. And we'll have a little bit of room for questions along the way, as I'll explain here in just a bit. You also might hear us refer to this report as the BER, which to us stands for Biennial Energy Report. It's become fodder for a lot of puns around here. We're trying to break ourselves of the acronym habit, but 2022 BER got shortened to TUBER, and the potato jokes sort of flowed. And we hope that you'll engage with us during this presentation through the chat function. You can find that at the bottom right of your screen. Using that, feel free to submit questions to either me or the ODO team through this chat box. my colleague, Jessica Reichers. She's monitoring these chats and will either assign your question to one of the staff to answer. She'll ask it to the speaker if it's a clarifying question, or perhaps she'll suggest it be addressed at the end of the webinar. We're recording this webinar and the questions, so if we don't get to yours during the webinar, we'll do our best to find an answer and follow up with you. If you have any technical issues, you can submit them through the chat box if that's still working for you, and we'll get someone to try and help you as quickly as we can. Jessica is monitoring the chat, and so feel free to pop any questions or technical issues in there. We'll respond and or either look for an opportunity to ask the question later in the presentation. So in this presentation, we're also going to do a little bit of polling. There'll be a few times during the webinar where a question will pop up on the right side of your screen, and it might say Slido on it. We hope you'll answer those questions because these polls are going to allow us to have a little bit of a choose your own adventure webinar today. About three points in the presentation, the audience gets to decide which direction we go with topics. Lastly, I'm sure you've all experienced this in the more virtual workspace that we're all now in, but technical difficulties, internet glitches, who knows what's possible. Those all may occur. We're coming to you from our Salem office, our home offices, living rooms, kitchens. If you're lucky, you may even get to see some of our kids and pets. Surely a cat or two will make their appearance here. But we really appreciate you joining us and having the opportunity to share this report with you today. We're quite proud of it, and we look forward to introducing you to it. So before we launch into the report itself, a few words about the Oregon Department of Energy. You'll see here our mission statement and the way we talk about the work we do within the 5 broad categories that you see here. The Biennial Energy Report, or the BER, is a key product that the agency uses to help Oregonians make informed decisions about energy. It's also emblematic of several of the bullets you see under the What We Do section. It's a central place for Oregon's energy data. Information and analysis can be used for energy education, technical assistance, and really in helping Oregonians with their energy challenges. So why did we write this thing in the first place? Well, in 2017, the legislature passed House Bill 2343, which charged the department with developing a report every 2 years to inform local, state, regional, and federal energy policy development and energy planning and investments. This report, which is based on analysis of data information, a whole lot of analysis of data and information, that's collected and compiled by ODO and provides a comprehensive review of energy resources, policies, trends, and forecasts, and really what they mean for Oregon. And as you'll see as we go through them, the sections target different audiences. Maybe you're someone who already has experience with energy efficiency, so skip ahead to the policy briefs on those topics. Maybe you don't know much about backup power or long duration energy storage. So you can spend some time learning about that in the 101 section. If you're new to Oregon or energy in general, I think the history timeline is a great place to familiarize yourself with the key events that really help shape Oregon's energy system. And this slide details the overall table of contents for the report. As you can see, the authors tackled a really robust selection of topics. We feel strongly that this BER truly offers something for every reader. So with that introduction in mind, let's dive in. We'll start with energy by the numbers, and this is a similar format to what many of you might have seen in the 2020 report. So you can compare charts and graphs really across the years, which we hope is useful for you all. The purpose of energy by the numbers is to really provide the facts and the figures on Oregon's overall and sector-based energy use, energy production and generation, and energy expenditures. Energy by the Numbers focuses on the metrics and data available to track how Oregon produces, purchases, and uses various types of energy. And you can see in the table of contents for this section on this slide, all of the different topics we cover in Energy by the Numbers. And so to tell you more, and I think we can probably advance this slide. Thank you. To tell you more about what energy Oregon imports, produces, and exports, and how to read this rather crazy looking diagram. Here at Odo, we refer to it as the squid. The proper name is a Sankey chart, but we've really grown to love it. But anyway, to tell you more about it is Stephanie Cruz. She's a facilities engineer in our planning and innovation division, and she's going to take the mic. She'll also talk a little bit about some of the trends and what's new in the Energy by the Numbers section. So Stephanie, over to you.
Thanks, Andy. Hi, everyone. I'm excited to share some of the highlights from Energy by the Numbers section. Developing this section is always a delight to my engineering sensibilities. So if you, like me, want to examine the numbers and the charts, I encourage you to dive in online and read through this section. This chart represents the flow of energy in Oregon, from energy produced in state, energy imported to the state, energy converted for electricity generation in state, all the way through to sector energy use and energy exports. And this data is based on the 2020 calendar year. The data comes from several sources, including EIA generation information, sector consumption data, and Oregon Department of Energy's own electricity resource mix and transportation fuel analysis. Most of the energy that Oregon produces in state is renewable, including hydro, wind, and biomass, while Oregon's energy imports are primarily either fossil fuel-based raw fuels or electricity that is generated from fossil fuels. The energy we produce and import helps meet various needs from in-state electricity generation to transportation fuels to the natural gas and electricity that supply homes and businesses. Some energy ultimately goes unused due to system inefficiencies, and some is exported to other states. Oregon saw an overall trend of increased energy use for almost 4 decades, an average of 3.6% growth per year from 1960 to 1999. During that time, the state shifted from a reliance on fuel oil and wood to an increased use of natural gas and electricity in homes and businesses. Oregon reached its highest consumption of energy in 1999 in both stationary and transportation uses. Since then, total energy use has been decreasing. The amount of energy used in Oregon declined by 13.4% between 2000 and 2020. Energy consumption per capita does not directly correlate with overall energy use. In the last 20 years, Oregon has seen a steady population increase during a period of slight decline in the overall energy consumption, translating to a steady decrease in energy consumption per capita. Energy efficiency remains the second largest resource in the Pacific Northwest after hydropower. The Northwest Power and Conservation Council's 2021 Northwest Power Plan concludes that cost-effective energy efficiency can continue to meet a large amount of new load growth in the region. However, energy efficiency achievement has been on a downward trend due to many factors, including the pandemic, flat to declining investments in energy efficiency, and increasing costs of energy efficiency solutions. Oregonians spent less on energy in 2020 than in 2018, mostly due to the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on transportation fuel consumption. Transportation fuel costs are the largest variable in Oregon's energy expenditures, with global crude oil market prices being the major market influencer. Of the $5.7 billion that Oregonians spent on transportation fuels in 2020, most of that pays for the extraction, transport, and refining of fuels in other states. You can read more about this in the Energy Report's Consumer Energy Cost Drivers section under Energy 101 topics. Oregon has taken many steps to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but the state did not meet the interim greenhouse gas emission reduction goal of 10% below 1990 levels by 2020. Energy policies such as the Renewable Portfolio Standard and the Renewable Fuel Standard, as well as the Great Recession, drove greenhouse gas emissions reductions in the mid-2000s and early teens. But since 2012, emissions have been slowly but steadily rising. In 2019, actions to address the COVID-19 pandemic led to a reduction in transportation emissions as more Oregonians started to work from home. However, emissions resulting from electricity use rose in 2019, largely due to lower available hydropower that year, necessitating increased generation from natural gas resources. Hydropower continues to be the largest portion of Oregon's electricity generation resources, followed by coal and then natural gas. Renewable resources like wind and solar have been steadily increasing in the state and are expected to grow as the investor-owned utilities are working to achieve the state's 100% clean electricity goal by 2040. Oregon's mix of electricity generation varies from year to year, largely because the state's hydropower output is affected by the amount and type of precipitation the state receives each year. OTA provides annual updates to this information on our electricity resource mix webpage. So I encourage you to go check it out there. It's also one of the projects that I work on every year. Direct use fuels are used for space heat, water heating, and cooking food in our homes and businesses, while also being used for a variety of manufacturing and industrial purposes. As you can see in this annual consumption chart, Oregon's direct fuel use has changed significantly over time. Natural gas has replaced heating oil, wood, and coal use in many Oregon buildings and industrial processes as a less expensive and cleaner burning alternative. Biomass is a renewable source of energy and has steadily increased in use. Biomass comes from resources like wood, agricultural crops, food or yard waste, and animal and human waste. Oregon uses biomass as a source of energy, as a feedstock to create biofuels, and as manufactured products such as wood chips, wood pellets, and charcoal. Gasoline consumption is the largest portion of energy in the transportation sector, followed by diesel and jet fuel. Ethanol and biodiesel, which are blended into gasoline and diesel respectively, are growing. Electricity, which comprised over 1.5% of fuel consumption in 2021, cannot be easily discerned on this chart, but it is growing rapidly as electric vehicle adoption increases. The Energy Report's Energy Resource and Technology Reviews includes a section with foundational information about the transportation fuels consumed in Oregon. Energy burden is a significant concern for many Oregonians, and the number of energy-burdened households is higher in many rural parts of the state. A household is considered energy burdened if they use more than 6% of their income on energy. 23% of all Oregon households were considered energy burdened in 2020, and the energy affordability gap, what it would take to have all households paying less than 6% of their income on energy, is estimated to be $289 million per year. Transportation burden, which you might also hear, represents the total annual transportation costs of households in comparison to their income. Both transportation burden and energy burden together are indicators of affordability for Oregonians. 90,543 Oregonians were employed in the energy industry in 2021. Over the pandemic, Oregon saw a decrease in the number of energy jobs across most types, but has since resumed increases in the number of energy jobs across all sectors. Oregonians make up 2.2% of jobs in the national solar industry. So that concludes my overview of the highlights of Energy by the Numbers. I wanted to take a pause for a moment and check in with Jessica to see if there's any questions that we should answer for the whole group.
Thanks, Stephanie. Great overview. I don't see any questions from anyone yet, but I just want to remind folks, if you are interested in asking a question, the easiest way to do that is to click on the little thought bubble that's in the lower right-hand part of your screen and throw your question in there, and we can pass that on to the experts either in the middle of the conversation or perhaps at the end of the presentation as well.
All right, still seeing no questions in the chat. Thank you, Stephanie. That was a really great overview. We'll now move on to the history timeline, which is really one of my personal favorites. It's been refreshed this year and features some pretty impressive technology. So Really, the purpose of the timeline section is to help the reader understand really what shaped Oregon's energy system and put the various events into context. The timeline starts with the Missoula floods that helped form our state's landscape and goes all the way through the closure of Oregon's only coal power plant just back in October. This timeline highlights the events that brought us really to where we are today. This actually is time for our first poll and the first chance for our audience to choose their own webinar adventure. So it will appear hopefully on the right side of your screen, and your vote will determine the direction the timeline takes. The interactive timeline offers a look into many aspects of our state's energy history, and we're asking you to please choose the timeline feature that most interests you. If you're not seeing anything on the right, there may be a green S that says Slido, and you might have to flip the little arrow from sideways to down. But if you do, you'll see three options: energy policy, energy firsts, and one called Media Showcase. And Media Showcase is really, well, I guess our chance to show off some of the neat audio-visual capabilities of this platform. So please select your vote and push send, and we will see which direction we'll head with the timeline. We'll give folks just a little bit of time to get those votes in. All right, it looks like so far energy policy is our clear winner. So taking us on the tour of the timeline is Erica from our communications group. And Erica, over to you for energy policy.
Great. Hello, all. I'm excited to be here. Thank you, Andy. That was a great setup. As Andy said, I am part of the communications team here at Odo. My name is Erica Zeigler. I was able to lead this project, and it's been one of my most favorite projects I've ever worked on. I'll give you a little background as we go into the timeline. Let me go ahead and get that up for us first. All right, to be sure, can we see the timeline?
It looks good, Erica.
Great, okay. So a little background, in the 2020 BER, we debuted the Oregon Energy History Timeline, but it was a static, on a document sort of timeline. We had our director, Ginny Benner, lead the events there, and she worked with colleagues and staff members and politicians and family to create this wonderful collection of events. And we included what we could when it came with, photos and that sort of thing, but it was what it was. Fortunately, it was well received, and we immediately started thinking of ways to make it even better. And the key thing that we wanted was interactivity. It's fun. It also makes these sort of events and information in Oregon history more accessible and more digestible to different age groups and backgrounds. So that was our goal. And after some research, we found a really dynamic platform called Tiki-Taki, and we started this project. So let me go ahead and jump in. I will give you a quick tutorial on the navigation because I truly hope that you'll spend more time with this after the webinar. If you take a look, here it is. It's on our Energy Info website. And as Andy mentioned, we start all the way back. Missoula floods, was that 18,000 to 15,000 years ago? Because that event and other similar events really shaped the landscape of the state and surrounding area and how we develop and get our energy today. So here's the starting point, and we have developed sub-timelines, and that was similar to the poll you just took. One is on energy technology and innovation, one is on energy policy, one is on diverse energy contributors, and then this main event timeline down here. You can go ahead and drag this all the way through. You see these boxes, those are the actual events. You see more, you can click on that and it'll bring up information about that specific event. If you know a year you want to jump to, you can go down to this very bottom bar with these nice little highlight bubbles. See, let's click on 1979. It'll squish you all the way to that date, and you can look in that area. I want you to note this wrench. This has a lot of power down here. This search bar is actually really useful, and it is a good search bar. You could put in something like the word solar, and all of the events that have that word solar in it will be highlighted, and you could cruise through that. You have categories, and those are just what I showed you in the sub timeline. And then view type is really nice. If you don't like seeing those sub timelines, you can just go to a standard view and just get all of the events right there and just take your time and explore on through. So let's go ahead and close that. And let's honor your selection of theme is energy policy, which I have to admit I'm a little surprised, but let's do it. So we'll go all the way back to the beginning. Click back on this wrench to see our sub timelines. Energy policy, there we are. So let's move, see if I can move my face so I don't have to see that. Okay. So you can see it's more of a magenta color here. We like to call it tulip. And all of the energy policies will be in this line. So of course, way back in Missoula flood times, there's not going to be any energy policies. We'll just keep going forward. So it looks like our very first one is the Public Utility Act of 1911. Not much happening there, but at least you get a start. We have more activity as time goes on. Yep, 1919 to 1920 to 1935. So this was interesting. Oregon passes first per gallon state gasoline tax. That's really interesting. There's some information there. And the further we get along, we'll start getting more media choices and more photographs. There's President Roosevelt there. This is really big for the states. Oops, sorry about that. Establishes the Rural Electrification Administration. Let me see if I can get you some multimedia in one of these. The energy policy events are a little more straightforward, but I'm definitely going to get you some of the ones with a little bit of audio and video. Let's go down to 1941. I'm not sure how familiar you guys are, but Woody Guthrie was actually employed by BPA, and he was hired to write songs and produce 26 songs in the 30 days of his employment. And one of these, the most famous song, is Roll on Columbia. And if you take a look at this event, you can see at the very top left here, you have images, which is one that's displayed, and then audio, if there is any audio, it'll show right there. So let's take a look at this first one. Looks like we've got 3 songs that you can explore. I'll play about 5 seconds of that. Okay, so a lot of fun. There was so much information out there. We had a lot of fun collecting it. It's a living timeline. We add to it and change things regularly when needed to be. So let's still go along our energy policies. Look, 1946, Congress passes the Atomic Energy Act of 1946. That was a big deal too. Let's see if I can find something with some more media. You guys chose the most straightforward one.
Hey, Erica, just so you know, the audio wasn't working, so media might not be helpful at this time.
Thank you for that.
With WebEx as the intermediary between the timeline and our audience, sometimes audio doesn't work, but if you get on here and play with it yourself, there's a lot of really great media to experience.
That is a bummer. We tested, but what are you going to do? We also have policies that weren't necessarily just Oregon. This was national, and it still was very important for Oregonians in the state as well, and energy development. We have the Oregon Department of Energy, developed in 1975. That's a neat blurb there. We've got some photos. We'll go through. This was a lot of fun. As I mentioned, we were able to collect a lot of information. One of those things that we did is we were invited and reached out to different organizations and people across the state to do original interviews. And Janine helped me secure an interview with Congressman Peter DeFazio back in, I want to say September, and we were able to go visit him and had a great conversation about when Congress passed the Pacific Northwest Electric Power Planning and Conservation Act. It's a must listen. You can find out more here. I have links in a lot of these events, and then also audio. You'll find the whole interview there. There's a fun image of Congressman DeFazio and Janine. Keep on going. Let's see what our very last energy policy is. The Clean Air Act amendments passed in 1990. This green sub-timeline of diverse energy contributors is really interesting, and we're adding more and more. This, just the nature of things, it's taken a bit more research to find these events, but there are events, and it's a great learning experience. Let's see, 2009. Okay, it looks like our last one was in 2021, and Oregon legislature passes House Bill 2021. See, the Oregon legislature passed House Bill 2021, which introduced a broad range of actions, including a target of 100% emissions-free electricity from Oregon's large investor-owned utilities and electricity service suppliers by 2040. You can find out more, link there, and I believe this one goes, to the OPP article. So lots of fantastic things. I really encourage you to explore it. We want to get this in front of all kinds of different people, and like I said, it's a living tool, and we'll keep adding to it. I'll go ahead and stop sharing now. And at this time, were there any questions?
I'm not seeing any in the chat. Jessica, have you received any questions for Erica?
I did not. I apologize for my tardiness. I lost my mouse. It happens. No questions, but I would just like to add, Erica, that Jessica Arnold, thank you for this. She said the timeline is amazing and appreciated the work.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much, Jessica. And please check out the events. It was a bummer the audio wasn't working, but it's worth it. So to take a moment for that. Thank you, everyone, for your time.
Thank you, Erica. And thank you for putting this all together. It is impressive and really shows the amount of work that went into it. So I encourage everybody to spend some time with it. There's so much great material on there. We are now to our second vote. And this one has to do with energy resource and technology reviews. And this section builds upon what was in the 2018 and 2020 reports. This section features 6 categories of energy resources and technologies that we use or produce here in Oregon, covering the spectrum from traditional to truly innovative. You can see the topics on the right-hand side, everything from electricity generating technologies to hydrogen. But for this portion of the webinar, you again get to choose your own adventure. And hopefully Slido will refresh itself on the right side of your screen. If it doesn't, you might have to adjust the little arrow to the left of the Slido brand name. And if you can get that to work, you'll see 2 choices. The first being energy efficient building technologies, including heat pumps, which are quite popular in many realms of discussion lately. And the second option is transportation fuels. So please choose the option that most interests you, and we'll have an expert lead you through that topic. It looks like we have a tie so far. So if you have not yet voted, please do so. And we'll give folks just a few more seconds to get those votes in. Okay, I think I'm about ready to call the election here. And we will be learning about energy efficient building technologies featuring heat pumps. And leading us through that, we'll bring Stephanie Cruz, our facilities engineer, back. And Stephanie, you've got the mic.
Great. Thanks again, Andy. You're missing out not going through transportation fuels with Michael, but maybe that's going to be hosted in a future webinar. So we'll let Ruchi have a moment to get our slides rolling.
Thank you to Ruchi for commanding the empire of slides in the background. We really appreciate it.
So this technology review provides more information on energy efficient equipment, including heat pumps, water heaters, smart devices, and appliances, including the history of each type of technology, trends and potential, and beyond energy considerations. Energy efficiency saves the Pacific Northwest ratepayers over $4 billion and reduces greenhouse gas emissions by over 22 million metric tons of carbon dioxide per year. Challenges to continued energy efficiency achievements include access to capital for energy efficiency investments, including decreased investment in cost-effective energy efficiency, competition from low-cost renewable solar and wind resources, limited availability of technologies, and lack of consumer familiarity with efficiency products, and recent supply chain and shipping delays related to the COVID-19 pandemic. But advances in energy efficiency have helped utilities manage regional demand and reliability for energy, improved energy bills, and thus reduced energy burden for many Oregonians, and contributed to progress towards state and local climate goals. There remains significant energy efficiency potential to continue to provide these benefits. Advanced technology adoption rates vary according to many factors, but costs and barriers can leave some groups behind. Incentives and market transformation efforts that focus on closing these gaps will help achieve regional and local goals. So, first category is heat pumps. In 2017, about 15% of single-family households in the Pacific Northwest used heat pump as the primary heating system. Research from Washington State showed an increase in the number of households using electricity for heating from approximately 20 to 90% of surveyed respondents, which indicates an increase in homes using electric technologies like heat pumps for their homes. Oregonians could save about 50% on home heating costs with a heat pump compared with electric resistance heat like a cadet or baseboard heater. Heat pumps move heat rather than create it. In heating mode, heat pumps collect heat from the ambient outdoor temperatures, concentrate it, and then transfer heat into the building, even on cold days. In cooling mode, heat pumps operate like regular air conditioners and refrigerators, moving heat from inside the building or refrigerator to the outdoors. Heat pump technology is essentially the same as refrigeration technology, except that heat pumps have a reversing valve that allows operation in two directions for both heating and cooling. There are four main types of heat pumps: air source heat pumps, ground source heat pumps, sometimes referred to as geothermal heat pumps, and water source heat pumps, and gas-fired or absorption heat pumps, which are relatively new types of heat pumps that are not yet commercially available. So look for more on those in the future. A few configurations for installation can be set up. They can be ducted or ductless. They can be packaged in all-in-one unit or split systems with a part of the unit indoors and outdoors. And they can also have a single head, so a single zone that they're controlling, or a multi-head system that controls several zones within a building. If you are intrigued by heat pump technology and want to learn more, you can dive into this technology review and get a lot more information than I've highlighted here. The next technology we featured was household or was hot water. I'm using the wrong words. We all call it a hot water heater, but actually it's a water heater. Um, but colloquially, it gets changed as we go along. So household water heaters have been around since the late 1800s, and heat pump water heaters were first patented back in 1937. Since then, the application of this technology has gotten more efficient. So today, Oregonians could see a 50% reduction in annual electricity use on average, switching from an aging electric resistance water heater to an electric heat pump water heater. Households could also see an 8% reduction in natural gas use, swapping from a standard water heater model to an Energy Star rated a natural gas fired water heater. Savings would be further increased by about 10%, swapping from a storage tank style to a direct vent tankless water heater. Oregonians could save about $330 a year for a family of 4, switching from an aging electric resistance storage water heater to a highly efficient heat pump water heater. So we've got a chart here highlighting several types of water heaters. High efficiency gas storage water heaters. They offer increased insulation, more efficient burners, and other improvements to increase the overall energy efficiency. You might have also heard the term condensing gas water heaters, which include a secondary heat exchanger that recovers additional energy from the combustion exhaust stream to improve energy efficiency of these units. Heat pump water heaters, similar to heat pumps, which I explained before, include technology that captures heat from the surrounding area, usually outside, and transfers it to the water in the tank. High efficiency units, such as Energy Star certified water heaters, can use 50% less electricity compared to standard electric resistance water heaters. Solar thermal water heaters, which include a variety of technologies and configurations, but the common thread of all of them is that they use solar energy to heat the water using solar energy collectors and a storage tank. And then last, tankless water heaters or instantaneous water heaters come in natural gas or electric models and operate, and even propane models. I used to have one. They operate using the same concept as typical water heaters, but they don't contain a storage tank. When they only heat water on demand, they save the energy that would have been lost from idling with warm water in a storage tank during standby operation. And for natural gas or propane units, they don't have a pilot light, reducing natural gas use there as well. And the third category of technology that we highlighted in this topic includes smart devices and appliances. And this topic covers a broad category of Wi-Fi enabled or otherwise connected devices that can be programmed to reduce energy use, collect information about energy use and habits of building occupants, and receive and respond to signals from the owner, grid, or utility. They can range from a fully integrated automated building energy management system in a commercial building where multiple appliances and pieces of equipment can be monitored and controlled by a central computer connected to the internet and potentially even remotely operated, onto a single smart appliance such as a refrigerator that sends a mobile alert to the owner. Smart devices and appliances are designed to use automation and connectivity together to conveniently achieve energy savings while reducing the amount of time that building occupants need to actively engage in their energy management practices. This combination of advanced technology and convenience are the main attractions of smart technology. These devices can also be part of utility demand reduction or demand response programs, where participants voluntarily agree to have the utility control the device and turn it off or change settings to reduce peak loads and operate the system more cost effectively, thereby helping to keep rates as low as possible and usually getting a deal on their electricity rates while this is happening. Some more specific examples of smart tech include smart thermostats. Again, Wi-Fi enabled devices capable of connecting to a smartphone or similar device. The difference from programmable thermostats is that they are easily controlled remotely and can automatically react to building occupants. Smart appliances don't have to be Wi-Fi enabled and controllable by a smartphone, but many are. Refrigerators, water heaters, heat pumps, furnaces, washers, dryers, and even tea kettles or coffee makers can come with this added level of control and connectivity. The primary components are integrated features that save energy and add convenience and sometimes increase safety. My favorite example of this is the inevitable recycling of the dryer to refluff the clothes before you fold them, reduce wrinkles. So you can actually set many new dryers to turn on that fluff cycle, like right before you come home or right before you would be available to fold the laundry. So you only have to run that last cycle once instead of, I don't want to admit to how many times I've done that in my house. Let's see, smart electric vehicle chargers. So with electric vehicles expected to create new load growth for electric utilities as the adoption of these vehicles increases, utilities can meet this anticipated growth through a variety of options. And one of those includes smart EV chargers. These chargers are connected devices that can regulate when and how fast an EV charges. And they can also be connected to the utility control to only use electricity when it's available and not increase those peak demands. And the key that increasing peak demands will reduce the utilities' need to increase their generation resources. If you are curious about how utilities manage load, I've got a Burr article for you. We can totally link you in the chats. We've got, I think, several topics that explain the vast and complicated network that provides electricity to homes. Last, smart or controllable lighting. Lighting controls come in various forms, including scheduling, occupancy, and daylight sensors. More advanced lighting controls include Wi-Fi connectivity and control in combination with the sensors, which allow for the convenience of remote control while also using automated sensors to passively save energy. So to conclude, all these technologies, in addition to improved building materials, represent continuing opportunities to improve energy efficiency in Oregon's buildings. Working to reduce barriers and increase education about these types of technologies will help increase adoption rates. All right, so Jessica, do we have questions in the chat for this topic?
You know, it's been pretty quiet in the chat, and I'm surprised by this because I know some of the people who are watching this and they're not shy. So I think I'm going to attribute this to just you doing a bang up job on explaining all of this information. But just want to encourage folks, if you do have questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat. We enjoy answering questions. It's one of our favorite things to do, in fact. So happy to help with that if anybody's got anything.
Well, seeing no questions appearing in the chat, thank you again, Stephanie. That was also a great presentation. We are going to now transition to our Energy 101 section, which is a collection of articles that really give a primer on a variety of subjects. For the Energy 101 section, like the previous two, we're going to do an audience vote. So here soon you'll see Slido refresh on the right side of your screen. If it doesn't, again, click the little arrow to the left of the Slido name. And when you do, you'll see a couple options. The first being consumer energy cost drivers. What are all the things going into the consumer cost of energy? The second option is agricultural electrification and emerging technologies. And I believe there's some drones involved with that emerging technology. So as before, pick the topic that most interests you, and we will pull up the respective subject matter expert to take us through this section of Energy 101. And we'll give folks just a few more seconds to get those votes in. We're currently at a tie, so if you have not yet voted, please do so.
And Andy, while people are voting, I'll just chime in and say, you know, if any of these topics interest you and your organizations and you'd be interested in talking to Odo about us presenting on that specific issue, please feel free to reach out. I will throw my contact information into the chat and you can reach out to me and I'll get you to the right person.
All right, it looks like our voting is calmed down a little bit, and another perhaps surprise upset, consumer energy cost drivers are the winners. So we will have Amy take the mic and she will walk us through this section of Energy 101. So Amy, over to you.
Thank you. And I'm a little bit disappointed that folks didn't vote for the agriculture section because I was excited to hear more about that, but I'm here to talk to you about consumer energy cost drivers. So one of the Energy 101 topics in the 2022 Biennial Energy Report looks at what drives energy costs for consumers. Costs for transportation fuels like gasoline and diesel are largely driven by global oil commodity prices. And because the state has no meaningful influence over global oil prices, it can't directly protect consumers from price volatility for petroleum-based fuels. Like transportation fuels, wholesale prices for electricity and natural gas are primarily influenced by supply and demand dynamics and fuel commodity costs, which can cause prices to fluctuate month to month. State regulators have little to no authority to influence wholesale costs or mitigate cost volatility in the wholesale energy markets. In contrast, retail prices for electricity and natural gas service are not directly determined by supply and demand dynamics. This is because electric and gas utilities are subject to state cost of service regulation that insulates consumers from month-to-month fluctuations in electricity and natural gas costs. In Oregon, utilities are regulated monopolies that are obligated to provide safe and reliable service in exchange for earning just and reasonable rates. Rates are considered just and reasonable if they allow a utility to recover its prudently incurred costs and earn a reasonable rate of return on capital investments that are used in service to ratepayers. Under this framework, retail electricity and natural gas utilities estimate the total amount of revenue they'll need to earn to recover their operating costs and a portion of their capital investments, plus earn a reasonable rate of return on those investments over the next rate period, which is usually around 2 years. This total revenue requirement is then divided by the utility's projected retail sales to calculate the rates customers will be charged for electricity or gas service over that period. Utilities pass fuel costs on to customers as an operating expense, but they aren't entitled to earn a profit on those expenses. So if fuel costs rise during a rate period, those added expenses will usually show up in customer rates in the following rate period or occasionally adjusted rates in the middle of a rate period. In contrast, utilities are entitled to earn a profit on investments in infrastructure that's necessary to provide reliable service to customers. This cost of service framework, along with oversight from the Public Utility Commission for investor-owned utilities and publicly elected boards for consumer-owned utilities, is designed to ensure that utilities are fairly compensated for their services and that ratepayers are charged fair and reasonable rates for the energy they use. The chart on the slide here compares wholesale energy prices to PGE's retail rates over a period of time. The retail rates are in yellow and the wholesale rates or wholesale prices are in blue. So this slide illustrates how cost of service regulation insulates consumers from month-to-month fluctuations in electricity and natural gas rates because retail electricity and gas rates are generally constant for the entirety of a rate period. And that's all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions or pass it back over to Andy.
All right, thank you, Amy. Jessica, any questions from the chat?
Still no questions from the chat, but I do appreciate Amy's presentation. It's a question we get asked frequently. What actually goes into the prices that I pay when I go out and purchase energy? So if anything comes up, please feel free to add them to the chat or the chat, as I refer to it in the chat, because I am the typo queen. We're happy to address that question now, or we can throw it in at the end. So if any of the subjects we've talked about are of interest to you, then throw them in the chat and we can flag them for the experts when we get to the end of this presentation.
All right, seeing no fresh questions in the chat, we will transition over to policy briefs for our slide folks in the background. That should be slide 39. Just a hint of the electric tractor there. So like any of the topics we did not cover, the Burr features in-depth articles and some really great information in a digestible format. So if your vote did not get presented here, please check out the Burr. For the policy briefs, we're not going to do a vote. I'm going to turn this over to Michael Friels and the rest of the, well, not the rest, but some folks from the technology and policy team, and they will give our next presentation. So Michael and crew, over to you.
Thank you, Andy. All right, so the last section of the energy report is policy briefs, as Andy just said. In this section, we take a deeper dive into some of the hot topics Oregonians are thinking about. The purpose is to inform energy policy development, energy planning, and investments, and to identify opportunities to further Oregon's energy policies. As you can see from the table of contents to the right, subjects range from the future of Oregon's future, energy efficiency, workforce and supply chain issues, a wide variety of different topics. So I encourage you to take a look at all of them. But for today, we're going to be talking about the first 5 policy briefs. Can we have the next slide, please? So the first 5 policy briefs are part of a series on charting a course for Oregon's energy future, and that's what we'll focus on. So ODO staff reviewed 20 technical studies from across the country, mostly the West, that evaluated what would be required to achieve deep decarbonization and clean energy policies by mid-century. The good news, these studies find that achieving these ambitious policies, such as House Bill 2021 and the Climate Protection Program, are possible. And to do so will require focusing on some combination of 4 core decarbonization pillars: energy efficiency, electrification of end uses, and increasingly clean electric system requiring deployment of more renewable energy, and the development of low carbon fuels like renewable natural gas or renewable hydrogen. Over the next several slides, we'll hit on some of the highlights of our review of these studies while trying to characterize the multiple pathways available, the associated trade-offs of each. I will talk about natural gas and transportation, and then Amy is going to jump in and talk about the electric sector and trade-offs. So next slide, please. So starting with natural gas. So in Oregon, we use natural gas for cooking, space heating, water heating. In our homes and businesses, industrial facilities use natural gas to generate heat and our power manufacturing processes. Natural gas is also used for electricity generation and has allowed us to diminish our dependence on coal and expand our reliance on variable renewable resources such as hydropower, wind, and solar because it's an affordable on-demand fuel. Natural gas customers and total demand continue to grow in Oregon, increasing the demand for natural gas infrastructure expansion even as the state establishes policies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions over time. To achieve our state climate goals, Oregon must substantially reduce emissions from natural gas combustion. So with that in mind, we reviewed decarbonization studies to evaluate the potential role of natural gas and the existing gas infrastructure in a decarbonized Oregon future. So in looking at those studies, 3 key strategies emerged from the studies. 1, need to decrease the quantity of gas consumed through conservation energy efficiency improvements. So for example, building new or retrofitting structures to make them more energy efficient. 2, we need to reduce reliance on direct use gas through electrification of building systems and components. So for example, promoting fuel switching of natural gas to electricity in most easy to electrify applications. And 3, transition from fossil gas to low or zero carbon alternative fuels. So for applications that are hard to electrify, we need to develop alternative fuels that can use the existing gas infrastructure like renewable natural gas, renewable hydrogen, or the implementation of carbon capture technology to reduce emissions. The visual here on the bottom right is from Northwest Natural's Vision 2050, and it illustrates their balanced approach scenario, which shows over time, up to 2050, a 30% reduction in gas deliveries and a complete conversion of that remaining gas from petroleum natural gas to renewable natural gas and renewable hydrogen. This is one view of what the future could look like in Oregon. Each of the strategies in the studies we found present unique challenges, opportunities, trade-offs, and uncertainties. For example, Northwest decarbonization studies found that electrification and a greater reliance on renewable resources to generate electricity will reduce overall consumption of natural gas, but will likely also require continuing operation of existing natural gas thermal plants to supplement those variable resources. The studies also highlight the risk in planning to implement low carbon fuels not currently available in the market. There are also a variety of equity consideration. Rapid electrification of the built environment may leave some of our most vulnerable communities behind. Those that can electrify will do so, and those that can't may face increasing rates to maintain the existing gas system. Decarbonizing Oregon's natural gas will likely not come from one strategy, but through a combination of energy efficiency investments, electrification, and the development of low carbon alternative fuels. Next slide, please. Okay, and so for transportation decarbonization. So decarbonization of the transportation sector will be critical to meeting our state climate goals. The studies we reviewed were brief but consistent in their findings for the transportation sector. 1. Decarbonization begins with extensive electrification of as many vehicles as possible. This means rapid transition of light-duty vehicles from gasoline and diesel to electric vehicles. And when we're talking about light-duty vehicles, we're talking about passenger cars, SUVs, vans, pickup trucks, and vehicles less than 8,500 pounds. The success of light-duty vehicle adoption will depend on the availability of electric models and the charging infrastructure needed to support them. Can we get electric charging options to be as ubiquitous as the gas stations we're familiar with now? This will also take time. Passenger vehicles' average life is about 15 to 16 years, so even if all new car sales were electric, it will take a long while for all the fleet to be converted. It is also likely that some vehicles will be difficult or even impossible to electrify in the near to mid-term, and these vehicles will need low and zero carbon fueling options to achieve full sector decarbonization. For example, heavy-duty trucks, trains, aviation, and marine applications will lag behind light-duty vehicles. Renewable versions of diesel, natural gas, and aviation fuel are available and can reduce emissions today and may be a viable option. But renewable hydrogen also has the potential to be a zero carbon solution for these applications. But it's not publicly available in Oregon, and it will take significant development to make it readily available. As you can see in the visualization to the right, renewable electricity could power electrolyzers to make hydrogen, which could be used as a fuel or used to make synthetic biofuels to power hard-to-electrify vehicles. It is also important to note that some studies demonstrated that dependence on low and zero carbon replacement fuels may decline as technology advances and new vehicle models are electrified or other alternatives are identified. The cost of this dramatic shift in the transportation sector will be significant, and there are equity considerations to keep in mind. Fuel savings are likely to be substantial, and the upfront costs of purchasing electric vehicles will decrease and be in line with internal combustion engine vehicles, but they are expensive now and will be a significant barrier for many Oregonians. It will take time for the used electric vehicle market to develop and provide lower cost options. And developing equitable charging infrastructure will also be a challenge. If you're renting or living in multifamily housing, you may not have access to charging at home or have little control over adding charging. You may have to charge your vehicle at more expensive or just inconvenient retail public charging stations. Decarbonization of the transportation sector by greater use of renewable biofuels, electricity, or other alternatives that can be produced in Oregon will be critical to the state meeting its decarbonization targets. And it also presents an exciting economic opportunity to retain more transportation fuel-related dollars in the state. I do want to also mention that ODO will be coming out with our biennial zero emission vehicle report later this year. And that report will provide a lot of great information on where we are today and where we're going. And now Amy will talk about the electric sector.
Thanks, Michael. The studies we reviewed all predicted that demand for electricity will grow significantly in the decades ahead, driven by increasing electrification of buildings and vehicles. Depending on the pathway we follow to reach our clean energy target, Oregon's electricity demand is projected to increase by 50 to 100% between now and 2050. At the same time that our electricity demands are growing, we'll also need to be cleaning or decarbonizing the electricity flowing through the grid and serving Oregon customers. This means that we will need to deploy additional renewable energy resources to meet new electricity demand, while also replacing existing fossil resources with renewable resources. One study looking at Oregon specifically found a need for as much as 30 gigawatts, or 30,000 megawatts, of new wind and solar capacity to meet Oregon's electricity needs in 2050. And to put that into context, approximately 2 gigawatts compared to 30 gigawatts of wind and solar capacity were deployed in Oregon between 2010 and 2020. There are multiple pathways to achieve our clean energy targets, but the scale of clean energy development will be substantial under every scenario. There are also important considerations and trade-offs associated with different pathways for transitioning to clean energy. For example, if we build more transmission, we might be able to import more solar power from California and the southwestern United States and import more wind power from across the region or off the Pacific coast. This pathway would allow us to source renewable energy from a broader geographic area, which would increase access to low-cost clean energy while minimizing land use impacts in Oregon. But building new transmission infrastructure can be challenging, and it can take a decade or more to secure the necessary approvals to build a new line. Alternatively, we could prioritize deployment of small-scale and community-based renewable projects, which can deliver clean energy while also providing co-benefits, like increased energy resiliency and new economic opportunities in local communities. But these projects are also likely to be higher cost than larger utility-scale projects. Oregon will need to engage with stakeholders to identify an optimal pathway to achieve the level of renewable energy build-out needed to achieve our policy targets while balancing these trade-offs. And next slide, please. In recent years, Oregon has experienced 116-degree temperatures, catastrophic wildfires, and extreme drought in large portions of the state. The effects and the costs of climate change are increasingly being felt by Oregonians, and these impacts are inequitably spread across the state's communities. Technical modeling shows that Oregon can achieve its mid-century clean energy and climate goals. Now, there are multiple pathways we can take to reach our goals, and each of these pathways has unique trade-offs for the state. So we have some really important choices to make. What do we want our clean energy future to look like, and how do we want to get there? How can we rapidly scale up renewable energy production while balancing important considerations around land use and wildlife impacts, community energy resilience, and the benefits and drawbacks of building a more regionalized energy system? How can we avoid, minimize, mitigate, and compensate for any adverse impacts that may arise? How can we ensure that the costs of the clean energy transition are not disproportionately borne by communities experiencing high energy burdens, and prevent those communities from being left behind by the transition? How can we work with stakeholders to chart a course for Oregon's energy future that's thoughtful, inclusive, and deliberately considers the trade-offs of the various pathways available to us? The choices we make should be guided by careful consideration and balancing of the costs, benefits, and other trade-offs associated with the pathways available to us. We have an opportunity to develop a common understanding of the necessary scale and speed of the clean energy transition, and to create an intentional strategy for building a clean energy economy that works for all Oregonians. But first, we need to chart a course to get there. Next slide, please. Thank you. While preparing the 2022 Biennial Energy Report, we determined that a comprehensive state energy strategy would help Oregon navigate these trade-offs and align public and private actions to support an intentional, equitable transition to a clean energy economy. A state energy strategy could identify specific pathways to meet the state's policy goals that maintain affordability and reliability, strengthen the economy, and prioritize equity while balancing trade-offs to maximize benefits and minimize harms. A state energy strategy that's informed by the best available data and analysis, and that's developed with input from diverse voices from across the state, could provide guiding principles and a framework to promote coordination on energy policy, planning, and resource investments. A state energy strategy should complement and build on existing plans that have been developed by utilities, regional entities, agencies, and local communities. And it should be developed using an inclusive process and should focus not only on how the state's energy systems can decarbonize, but also how to help Oregonians navigate the transition, with previously underrepresented voices at the center of the conversation and decision-making. The exact scope of the energy strategy should be developed through engagement with stakeholders, community members, and other state agencies, ideally as a result of direction from the legislature and governor. The House Committee on Climate, Energy, and the Environment is currently considering House Bill 2534, which would direct the Department of Energy to engage with stakeholders and produce a state energy strategy for Oregon. A clean energy transition is already underway in Oregon, but as the 2022 Biennial Energy Report explains, this transition could occur through a number of ways with different trade-offs and implications for the state. Developing a state energy strategy would give Oregon an opportunity to proactively plan for the transition that works for the state and our communities. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Amy. That was really well done. And I believe Jessica has a question from the chat.
I have a few, and thanks to Kara for the great questions that she threw into the chat. I'm going to start by answering the first one, then I have a question for Michael and one for Amy. So Kara asked us, how does Odo go about deciding what topics are going to be in the Biennial Energy Report? And I love that question because that's something near and dear to our hearts. All these things are near and dear to our hearts. I don't even know why I said that. But this area is really about getting a broad understanding of what people are interested in around energy. And that comes down to, we send out a survey to people to tell us, what are you interested in? What are the questions you have around energy? We just listen in the meetings that we go to and the conferences that we attend to, the topics that are seen as sort of the top of mind things that people are interested in, hot topics, if you will. And we also engage with stakeholders and others to understand sort of what they're thinking about as far as the energy world goes. And then last, we just do a lot of research on things happening at the state level, regional level, nationally, and even globally to understand what things people are thinking about around the world that might be informative or useful to discussions going on in Oregon. So I'd like to think that we have sort of a very broad approach to how we determine what these are. And then how we whittle it down to those subjects is, I could talk for 20 minutes about that process. It's a very lengthy process that involves a lot of discussion and long meetings. But if you're interested in more, reach out to me. Happy to talk to you about it. The next question that I have, Michael, Kara asked, and she was really interested in what Odo's role is with the Oregon Public Utilities Commission or Public Utility Commission, and how they are working on the Clean Energy Plan, particularly with how our natural gas utilities are working on those plans.
Yes, well, thank you for the question, Kara. I appreciate it. So As you probably know, so we don't have a formal role in supervising or working on the integrated resource plans, but we do try to. Our goal is ultimately to inform policy discussions. So we do work with PUC, and then we work with the utilities separately and have our conversations with them and try to follow the IRP process. And also other state agencies. So, for example, DEQ with their climate protection program development, having conversations with them and tracking the development of the climate protection program and other things that are going to influence those natural gas utilities. But ultimately, our goal is kind of work behind the scenes and hopefully inform the policy discussions, and work with those utilities about with the state policies and programs and see what we can do to inform that process and make sure whether it's a report like the Biennial Energy Report, providing an accurate view of what's happening within the market.
I know I'm on mute. I got it. If anybody has any follow-ups to what Michael just said, throw them in the chat and I'll happily pass them on to him. Thank you, Michael, for that great presentation and the answer that you've got there for Kara's question. And Amy, I had another question from Kara, which is, what are other states doing in engaging in energy strategies? And are there any lessons that have been learned from those processes in other states?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So the short answer is yes. Several states have either developed state energy strategies or developed climate action plans that are very similar to a state energy strategy. And we have been looking at several of those plans. The state of Washington developed a state energy strategy that we think provides a pretty good example of what a state energy strategy in Oregon might look like. I guess I would just editorialize that I think their strategy is phenomenal. I think Oregon would benefit from a similar strategy, but one that expands a little bit further into the analysis into different electricity specific pathways. And California also has created a plan that is more electricity focused. New York has a plan. There are many plans, and I'm happy to follow up and provide more examples if you'd like. But some of the key lessons that we've learned relate to the types of different policy mechanisms that you include in your plan matter, and the type of stakeholder engagement process that you apply in developing that plan really matters, and how you incorporate equity into the plan really matters. And I think that the Washington State Energy Strategy is a really great example for how you not only develop a plan that's a living document that provides recommendations that can evolve over time, but they employed a really robust stakeholder process in developing their plan, and they incorporated a variety of initiatives and processes and outreach to really ensure that equity was front and center in the development of their plan. And I think they just did a really good job there, and it provides a really good example of what Oregon could also do.
Thanks, Amy. Great answer. I would like to think that Oregon is like, we're at the perfect spot where we're not the first people to do something, so we can learn from other people's work and mistakes, but we get there up on the front edge so that we're able to take advantage of things early on. That's our sweet spot. I don't have any other questions in the chat, but we have 12 more minutes if there are questions to discuss here. Feel free to throw them in the chat. Happy to answer them.
And while we're giving folks just a few more minutes to get those questions into the chat, I'll call our collective attention to the links on the screen. If you want to read the entirety of the Biennial Energy Report, it's there for the taking. It's long, but well worth it. We also have a link to Odo's general website and a link to our portal where you can leave a comment. You can request a presentation like this or on other material. I know we didn't get to agricultural electrification and emerging technologies, including drones, or transportation fuels. So if there's anything you really want to hear about or dialogue with us, please make use of our abundance of web resources. And
I feel like
Jessica?
if there's
Oh.
anybody who's read the entire Biennial Energy Report, we owe you like a badge that you can put on your icon for all of the Teams meetings or WebEx meetings you have that says, I read the entire Biennial Energy Report. I think that's the least that we could do for people who've read the whole thing.
And it looks like those links are now in the chat. Thank you, Jenny, for that. Jessica, any other questions emerging in the chat?
I'm not seeing anything, so I will take that as a comment that this was well done and people walked away knowing more, being wiser, and perhaps happier. So that's what I'm taking away with this.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us on today's webinar, and thank you to our presenters for not only spending time with us today, but all the hard work they put into writing the BER, both this past iteration and in years past. It's been a long-standing labor of love. So thank you everybody, and have a wonderful night. And if questions pop up as you leave the webinar or start thinking about things, please reach out to us and we'll get you answers as best we can. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Bye.